Bo Show. We're going to dive into the two semifinal playoff game recaps, dive into the national championship game with an early preview, and then wrap up with some portal talk. So we'll get things started with the Ole Miss Miami game. Kevin, get us started on that one.
So first of all, it was to me what was an interesting game or interesting points about the game was how really close the score ended up. When if you just look at the way the game played out, Miami was pretty dominant. The 42 minutes of time of possession to like 17 for Ole Miss. Um, their offensive and defensive line were just absolutely dominant in the game. It really speaks to Chambliss's ability to make plays and keep Ole Miss in the game, especially with Lacey hurt. Now Lacey did have the big run early, and that helped get Ole Miss on the board. But after he was out for about 2 quarters, maybe a little over 2 quarters of the game, nursing a hamstring. And Miami had a couple of opportunities to really put the game away. Should have won it by 10 to 14 points. The opportunities to put it away, they dropped 4 interceptions in the game, and one would have been a pick six if they would have caught it. And then also too, they had a couple. They ran a reverse in the second half when they were driving and could have at least got a field goal and tried to get cute right on the edge of field goal range. Ended up missing a 51 yarder. So they had a couple of questionable play calls as they were moving the ball. Again, offensively, they had no problem running the ball. And sometimes they would be running the ball, moving the ball down the field, and then they would try something cute. But it was a really entertaining game to watch, though. I'll say that. And one of the better games to watch of the year. Again, and Chambliss, made some big plays. Even Miami scores with 18 seconds to go, and Chambliss completes 2 passes to get it inside Miami's 40 from their own 30 or from Miami's 38. They threw the last pass, in the corner of the end zone. So he almost got him in there, pulled out that four when he did that. So field goal wouldn't have done anything. But great game to watch. Miami's physicality played out, and their third down conversions. That was another thing. And I think that'll be interesting as we get into to talking about the national championship game. Miami continue to run the ball and set back up with third and shorts to continue with that 50 to 60% third down conversion that they've had so far in the playoffs. Sweet, what were your thoughts about the game?
Yeah, it was a great game. Miami should have won by 2+ touchdowns. Some of the plays that offensive coordinator called, it made me feel like I was watching a Marietta High School football game sometime between 2020 and 2025. The slow developing plays that just never work. Well, hell, let's run it anyway. Look, Miami had great success. They were running the ball, they were shoving it down their throat, and then they would do something. They'd call some totally unnecessary play that would push them back, or they'd get, the defense. It's a slow developing play. The lineman cheats a little bit. He holds. They'd get a penalty and push him back, and it didn't make a lot of sense. But that defense, they were on the field, and just dominate Ole Miss. Hats off to Trinidad Chambliss, keeping him in the game as long as he did. We talked about him and his draft possibilities. I think the kid's a first round pick. As a matter of fact, I don't even know what quarterback I would take over him if I was drafting the team today. Really, I think that highly of him. He doesn't have the strongest arm, but his arm's strong enough. And he's not a real dual threat, Lamar Jackson type, but he's more of a Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes type, the way he extends plays and keeps his eyes downfield, and then comes up with the across the body pass or something, that you're not expecting, and he keeps drives alive. So great game. DMAC, what were your thoughts on it, buddy?
Well, I was on a little bit of a televised blackout, but just from what I've heard from the game, you know, the physicality of Miami's defense was clearly there. I know Keywan Lacey had a huge touchdown run, and Trinidad, had a good game, but at the end of the day, that defense did enough to get away with a win, even given some of the questionable calls on the offensive side of the ball for Miami. So props to them. And that brings us to the Oregon Indiana game. There were what, maybe 5,000 Oregon fans there, Kevin?
There were not many. It's probably the most surprising neutral site game. I realize Indiana's closer that I've ever been to, especially when you consider it a semifinal game. It was easily 90-10, 90% Indiana fans and 10% Oregon fans, and maybe 95-5. Oregon had fans right by their band and two sections right by their band, and that was it. And even nothing up top. And it wasn't like you could see just spattered green here and there. It wasn't. Right there in their little allotment was all they had. And so that was, to me, was an incredible thing about a semifinal game that meant a whole lot. That score wise was competitive the first time they played. I know Indiana physically was better, but score wise it was competitive the first time they played. But this game, just Indiana just so efficient, and they play so well. They don't make mistakes. They don't have penalties. They don't turn the ball over. And then you add, to me, in that Mendoza is so good, 17 out of 20. He's had 5 incompletions in the last 2 games, and I think people got to understand that. If you look at his yardage, you don't really appreciate what he is. He had 220 against Bama, 177 against Oregon. But when you're 17 out of 20 and you're averaging, 10 yards a pass attempt, that type of stuff, you're moving the chains consistently. And just how accurate he throws the ball, he's really good. If you're a pro team, to me, you have to love the prospect of getting him. And of course, there's the Jets. I won't even get into that, but Indiana was really good, and then there were times that Dante Moore was good. After Moore threw the pick six, they had a really, really good drive that took him down the field, and he made a nice read on fourth down to complete it and get a touchdown out of it. Game was tied at 7. You think, okay, this is going to settle in and be an interesting game, and then he had another turnover deep inside his 10 where he went to throw the ball, an RPO type play, and the ball slipped out of his hands. He might have got it bumped, but slipped out of his hands, fumble, gave points. So that made it 21-7. Then he had a turnover at the end of the first half, towards the end of the first half. It ended up being 35-7. As good as Indiana is, you cannot give them things. You cannot give them short fields. You cannot give them turnovers. Similar to that Bama game when they went for a fourth down early, and Indiana scored. A team that does not make mistakes, if you get down 14, 17 points to them, you might as well be down 30. And I think that's one thing that Miami has to make sure, run the ball, slow the game down, and do not give Indiana short fields, because that, to me, was the biggest difference in the game, was how the Oregon turnovers and the short fields that they kept giving Indiana, and Indiana just scored, and it just dominoed and snowballed from there, and really turned into a game that, again, it's 35-7 at half, 56-22 at the end, and that was with a touchdown inside a minute for Oregon. So it was a dominant victory for Indiana. Sweet, your thoughts on that game?
Yeah, from literally play one, it was over. Moore, one of the guys that's being talked about as a possible first pick in the draft. Boy, just he had a rough night. I mean, his stats didn't show that. He was 24 for 39. He had the 1 pick, 2 touchdowns. The fumble that he had inside of their own 5. I put that on the running back because that running back stepped up, and I don't think he was supposed to be where he was when Moore put his arm back and hit his shoulder, which created the fumble. I don't blame that on him, but I mean, that first pick six, you just cannot have that happen in a game of this magnitude. Especially like you said, you can't give Indiana an inch because they'll take a mile. Miami's going to have to play very sound football. They're going to have to play their best game to beat Indiana. They're capable. I think Miami's defense, like I said, I like them as much as any defense in the country. And if there is a team that can, force a few turnovers or get a team out of their comfort zone, Miami might be the team to do that. If they could get a little pressure on Mendoza and bust him in the mouth a few times, let him know he's in for a game and hit him. Because that hasn't happened so far in the playoffs. He's been playing, he's been throwing from a clean pocket, and when he does get a little pressure, he just, he bounces out, manipulates the pocket, gets a pass off, and they're marching down the field. His accuracy is uncanny right now. So good for him. I just, that Miami Indiana game is going to be something. I'm going to hold off on a prediction right now, but like I said, I cannot see, Indiana beating themselves. Miami's going to have to go get it from them. DMAC, you have any thoughts on the title game?
Yeah, you posed a good question there. Indiana's not going to beat themselves, so Miami's going to have to go and beat them. Is Carson Beck a quarterback who can go and truly beat somebody? I think that's the biggest question for me. Both of these teams are physical teams. I give a huge edge to the Indiana coaching staff. But when it comes down to it, I put a lot in the hands of the quarterback. Mendoza's been great all season. Carson Beck has looked great at times, but has not always been great. So I'm not gonna make a score or win prediction yet, but I don't know if Carson Beck is that guy who can lead his team to win a national championship against a really physical, tough, stout team like Indiana. I do think that the front seven Miami's going to be able to create some pressure on Mendoza. Bain's great, Mazador's great, but I don't know if it's going to be enough to truly impact the game. What are your thoughts, Kevin?
Yeah, I think the whole thing is Miami's got to turn this into a fight at the line of scrimmage. And again, Indiana's awfully good at the line of scrimmage, but Miami has to run the ball well. They ran for a 150 against Ohio State, and then last week against Ole Miss, Miami ran for 190, and they've got to. It's the same. The way that they can win this game is they have to run the ball and let their offensive line get them first downs. And by that I mean they the last two games they were 50% on third down conversions against Ohio State, 7 out of 14, 11 out of 19 against Ole Miss. And it was because they ran the ball to create 3rd and 5, 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4. And Beck's been really good in when he's just got to convert, 3rd and short. It hasn't always been short passes. Sometimes he's thrown sideline outs 15 yards down the field, but it definitely opens it up and makes it where he can get the ball out. So that has to happen from Miami, and no turnovers. They have to play that type of game. Very similar to what Ohio State and Indiana played in the Big Ten championship. So I think Miami has to shorten the game, run the ball, and all these things that I'm saying, they're capable of doing. I think when you look at the game, the way the Ole Miss game played out and how tight that game was, I think that gave people a feeling that, Miami didn't play that well. And again, like Sweet said, I think it was more some of the play calls and then the dropped interceptions that kept that game from being lopsided. But we forget that, that Miami beat Ohio State by 10, and Ohio State and Indiana were, was a very competitive game in the Big Ten championship. I just say that to say that I, I think if Miami can be successful at the line of scrimmage and and convert more than 50% of their third downs, which they've done the last couple of games, they can keep this game into the fourth quarter, provided again that they have no turnovers. That being said, you know, um, Indiana's really physical at the line of scrimmage too. That's the most fun thing I'm looking forward to in this game. I want to see both these teams go at it at the line of scrimmage. Miami's defensive, or excuse me, Indiana's defensive line against Oregon was great. The pressure that they put on Moore that whole game with four people was incredible. So, offensive line at Miami against Indiana's defensive front, same thing. Miami's defensive front against Indiana's offensive line. That's the part I really want to see. Throw the score out. Watch the first half. Just watch the line of scrimmage. If you're a football fan, that to me is going to be worth watching the game. I think the game's going to be closer than what some people think. I do think Indiana will likely cover the spread, but I see it. It's an 8.5 point spread. I see it as like a 10-point Indiana win. A 27-17 type game where they score a touchdown late to put the game away. I think Miami's going to come into this game well prepared. I know none of us are high on Cristobal as far as winning you one game. That being said, he's won 3 tough games in the playoffs. Going on the road at A&M, very tough game. They played well. They did what they needed to do to win, beating Ohio State in a neutral site and really controlling that game. And then they physically dominated Ole Miss. Again, Shambles just made plays, and they couldn't sack him, and so that kept the game close. I think Cristobal will have the team prepared with his staff, and I think it's going to be a competitive game. And that line of scrimmage is going to be worth the price of admission or whatever you want to call it from your living room to watch. Sweets, what's your thoughts?
Listen, no doubt about it. Miami had the toughest road far and away to get to the championship game, to go into Kyle Field, and hold A&M to 3 points. I mean, come on. I called it, but it wasn't like it wasn't a Nostradamus prediction. I mean, everybody kind of knew A&M was going to choke, right? I mean, nobody was actually surprised by that. But still, tough place to play, playoff game. They went in and did what they had to do. And then, to go and do it again to Ohio State, Ohio State's a hell of a team at home too. And then, then to beat Ole Miss. I mean, that's, those are 3 great wins. And they certainly can beat Indiana. But like I said, they're going to have to play a really good game. They're going to have to make Mendoza uncomfortable. They're going to have to come up with maybe an interception or a big special teams play or something like that that turns tide, because that's the type of team that they're type of game you're going to have to play to beat an Indiana as good as they're playing right now. They're capable of it, but it isn't going to be easy. I like, like I said, you talked about the lines, Miami's defensive line versus Indiana's offensive line. That's a man-on-man matchup right there. Those are 2, grown man lines of scrimmage right there. And that's going to be a lot of fun watching those guys. Look forward to see who imposes their will upon who at the line of scrimmage. And, if Miami comes out and jumps on them, gets up 10 nothing or something, makes Indiana a little uncomfortable, we'll see how Indiana responds, because they haven't really been, they haven't got down and had to show that they can come back and do it. So, I'd like to see that. I'd like to see how they react if Miami can jump on them. Where do you want to go next, D-Mac?
Yeah, I've got one more comment here. I do love the way that Miami's playing, though. A lot of people felt like they should not have even gotten into the playoff. And three weeks ago, a month ago, I was probably in that group of people. And you've gone on to see them beat, what, 3 top 6 teams in the country. So they're definitely playing with a chip on their shoulder, Like they've really got something to prove. So, props to them for, it would have been easy for that narrative to continue have been to be played if A&M would have beat them by 21 in that first game. But they have played really good football through this college football playoff, and I think really opens the discussion for, hey, we've got to have 16 teams, and really opens the discussion for conferences to figure out the tiebreaker situation. Because they should have been in their conference championship to begin with. Um, Crazy that Duke won the ACC. That whole ACC debacle is just insane. And I think they've really pushed the needle forward to make change within conferences and college football as a whole moving forward with the playoff setup. So props to them for kind of being pioneers of change in a sense here.
I
Hey,
heard
one
on
thing.
the way home today, listening to Sports Talk Radio, that saying that the Big Ten and the SEC want to push it to 16. The SEC said 16. Big Ten came back and says, "How about 24?" So the two, the two big power conferences out of the four, I think there's no doubt that the SEC and the Big Ten are the power brokers as far as depth and money goes. They're already pushing for 16 and 24 now. So I don't think this 12 is going to last too long. I mean that's just a lot, but more football, I guess. So what do you do?
Hey, one more thing to remember in this game: Xavier Lucas, the cornerback from Miami, has to sit out the first half for that targeting penalty that he had, and that's a big part because behind him you have Jabari Antoine, the freshman from Louisiana. So will Indiana go at him in that first? So that's another thing to look at and consider.
And I know we'll probably do a deep dive into this game before Monday. But we'll go ahead and shift focus to the transfer portal now. I'm gonna pull up a quick stat on the transfer portal. Let's see here. There have been 2,986 kids enter the portal. 1,562 have committed and 31 have withdrawn. So you're still looking at 47% of the players who entered the transfer portal are still in the transfer portal. And as windows start to close, teams are filling out their rosters. I would predict you're sitting at probably 25 to 28% that really don't find a new home to play college football, which is a really alarming stat to me here. So I guess, Kevin, I'll let you kind of start with transfer portal and then we can dive into LSU specifics in a few minutes, but some overall thoughts on where big players have landed. Any thoughts at all?
Yeah. So to me, I just want to talk about a couple teams that I think are real winners in this, and you have several that are winners. But obviously, I like Indiana and the fact that how they came out and they went and signed some specific needs right off the bat. Uh, just continue. Signetti is very organized, knows what he wants. One thing that I also read that to me is impressive is that he makes the final decision on all those guys that he takes. I mean, they may bring him to him. A lot of teams have GMs, and I'm sure head coaches make that final decision. But Signetti absolutely watches film on everybody. But they were very decisive, and what they did early got the quarterback from TCU, got linemen, running backs. They filled what they're going to be with needs. Another team that I think is a big winner is Oklahoma State. They've signed like 40 players, and they needed it. That roster was really bad last year, so they had they've been good early. Penn State is another team. They've signed like 30. players so far. A lot of them came from Iowa State, but they've been very active and done well. And then obviously LSU, a lot of people have them at number one in the portal um, after they got Levitt. But they've signed, I think after today, 30, 31 guys, something like that. So they've been very active in the portal. Build depth. I think that's one thing for LSU, not just getting good players. They've redone the wide receiver room, and I really like what they've done there with Jace Brown from Kansas State and others, Wilson from Florida. But I really like what they've done with that. And then building depth. I mean, they got their fifth running back today, fourth in the portal, but if you count Barry, fifth running back, where last year they didn't have depth at that position at all. So they're building depth through things too. They got to fill out the offensive line, but they've done well. Texas Tech, obviously another team that has done well in the portal the last few years. They've done really well again, and were very decisive early, and went out and got some good players, got Sorsby and some others. Kentucky is a team that I think is kind of surprising. Kenny Minchie, C.J. Baxter, Lance Hurd, the offensive lineman. When you look at what Kentucky's done, they've been very effective with the portal. Virginia Tech, another team, they brought some guys from Penn State. Franklin's done really well, and in that DC area, he's brought some guys. So they've done really well also. I think right now those would be the teams that I would say have impressed the most. One team that I would say I think I look at and I go, um, where are they going to finish? Because they've got some things to add, and that's Alabama. Right now, they have 5 offensive linemen total on their team. Same thing with defensive linemen. They did get a kid from Mississippi State, but they lost James Smith. Also, Keenan graduated, Smith transferred to Ohio State. And so, to me, if they don't replenish on the offensive and defensive line, that team could struggle some next year. And they did sign a linebacker, but they've lost one. Lost the running back that they had committed early, Hollywood Smothers, to Texas. And again, their running game was not very good last year. So, that's a team I think's got a lot of work still left to do. Plenty of players out there, and they can get it done. And I don't care who they have at running back. If their offensive line, if they don't improve that, it's not going to matter. And they're losing a lot. Proctor hadn't said if he's going pro or not, but most people still expect him to. They lost Brailsford, their center, and then Formby transferred. He started at guard the last part of the year for them. So they got a lot to fill. Now, granted, they're going to be fine at the quarterback position. They're going to be fine at wide receiver, even though they only have like 5 scholarship wide receivers at this point. But you still have Brooks, and if Ryan Williams gets things tightened back up, you've got 2 really good wide receivers there. So there's still potential, still talent, still time for them to finish well. But they've got a lot to do there, in my opinion, to do that. So it's going to be interesting. And then another last thing I'll say about the portal is Oklahoma's lost several defensive players. They've still got a lot of talent, but I look at that team. They won on smoke and mirrors. They've lost McKenzie at linebacker and Omasigo, the other linebacker, and Nick Gentry committed to Georgia today, the cornerback. So I think Oklahoma's got to fill some spots too, because I don't think their offense is ready to carry that team at all. That defense, got that team to 9 wins, and in my opinion, one of the most fortunate teams towards the end of the season that we've seen, the way that they won some of those games. So, what's your thoughts on the portal?
Yeah, just being a little more LSU specific. The thing with the linemen, you talking about Alabama. I'm noticing a lot of teams out there that are still that lineman numbers are low all over. And keeping kids trying to, LSU has pushed out some of the higher rated linemen in the portal. But having watched them play for the past few years, I'm not sure, what the evaluations are. It's kind of scary from the standpoint of you look at them and say, if this is the best that's out there, then Lord, there's not much slim picks. But I think a lot of it has to do with coaching, being coached up, and being in the right scheme. I don't blame that on any of the linemen that LSU had, because it was a horrible scheme and they were just coached soft. The softness though is on the kids. At the end of the day, LSU's just got to get tougher on the offensive line, and I think with the new coaching staff and stuff, I think they're going to recruit a little differently and go after some kids that they can develop. But they better get to getting, because the portal's going to be closing here shortly, and there aren't a whole lot of linemen out there. So going to be really interesting to see how this all shakes out. DMAC?
Yeah, I'm Kevin. I like what you said about the wide receiver room for LSU. Jace Brown's a great addition. Trey Wilson. Um, I really like Trey Brown and Jackson Harris too. I think they're going to be guys who can really contribute. And then you added a lot of good depth pieces. One guy that I do think is a little underrated is Tyree Holloway, the I think West Florida transfer. I think he's going to have the potential to surprise some people. Yeah, LSU, I mean, has done really well in the portal, addressed a bunch of needs and depth on defense. Jordan Ross should be a really key contributor. Um, Ty Benefield is going to be a good piece to have in that safety room with Coley and Spears. You know, where I know we signed Sam Levitt and we've got Landon Clark. On roster too, but only sitting at two scholarship quarterbacks at the moment. I know the transfer from USC was high up on the list, and there's still some rumblings. It was us in Oregon. Oregon signed Raiola. So what do you think? What's next for the LSU quarterback room? I know they've got to visit someone later in the week. Do you think the door's completely closed on the USC transfer?
I don't, because I think it's a it's a need. We definitely need one more scholarship quarterback, and the rumor has it that they're willing to spend spend a couple million on this this competition that they're having on this third kid. I don't know what the numbers on Levitt are, nor Clark. But with three quarterbacks, I would guess that the number for the room's going to probably be around 6, 5, 7 million. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of linemen. But it's certainly a need. Can't go into the season with two scholarship quarterbacks, especially with Levitt being his injury not being a known entity. Definitely like to get another one in there, and Longstreet would be a great get. Heck of an athlete, great arm. And the type of kid that Kiffin likes from his style standpoint. So be really interesting to see how this shakes out. Kev, do you have anybody in mind that you think we're going after?
Well, Ryan Staub from Colorado is the player that's potentially coming in for a visit later in the week. Honestly, I hope we can do better than that. You got to have three quarterbacks now. The third one, there's a lot of people it could be. I think Huson Longstreet is still a very good possibility. He ends up at LSU. And where I'm coming from on that, and a lot of people are talking about it. So he wanted to go somewhere and start. At this point, though, where does he go and start? Now, he could go to Tennessee and start, but Tennessee Aguilera has a very good chance of getting his appeal and his hardship based on the fact that he played in junior college. It's the same thing they granted Pavia an extra year. So does Aguilera get that year? And then behind him, you have McIntyre, who was a 5-star too. So, if you're Longstreet, do you look at that room and say, oh, I want to go there? And then, Miami, they're talking about paying a transfer, but their second string guy, I think his name's Williams. He has a lot of support amongst their coaching staff. So where I'm going with that, it's not just a given that at this point that Longstreet's going to go somewhere and start. unless he wanted to go to a smaller tier school, a small Power Four school, or a G5. And I don't think he wants to do that. So I mean, if you got the chance to either go back to USC, play one more year behind Mavea, and start there next year, or go to LSU in the spring, you'll probably be the number one guy. Um, or you're competing for that number one spot. You take that into the summer, depending on how healthy Levitt is, you know, and Longstreet's certainly a talented player. So I would not rule it out that he can't be a close second. And if Levitt were to not play as well initially, that he might be the starter. So I think Longstreet, your play there for him is still very solid, because I think you can convince him that he can compete to start, and if he plays well, and certainly Lane has shown that he's gonna, if he has to make a change, he will, by what he did this year with Chambliss. So I don't think the door is closed on Longstreet at all. And I like the fact that they're still being aggressive, bringing Staub in, and I hope they bring others. They've got to get a third quarterback. There's no question about it. And there will be some out there. So that part, I think, is the interesting piece. The linemen, I do think there's enough linemen out there to get. You still have the tackle from Auburn. You still have the tackle from Arizona State that have not committed anywhere. And I still think there's the potential of a guy like Diego Pounds from Ole Miss to enter the portal. And then you have Devin Harper, who I think we all expect to be at LSU, the Ole Miss freshman that played a lot this year on the offensive line, played some right tackle and played some guard. And he entered the portal, and he's from Louisiana. He was an LSU commit last year. So I think, the chances that he comes back are very strong. So I think you'll see, over the next 3 or 4 days, LSU add 3 or 4 offensive linemen, or definitely by Sunday, you'll see them add some more. Stray, the kid that they got from Kentucky, the tackle they got there, I think he's a good player. Jacoby Jones, the junior college player they got, a lot of people think that he has the potential to be a starter. So I like what they've added, in the portal. They just certainly got to add more offensive linemen. But I think there's a good chance that they get Longstreet. And if not, I think they'll get a good backup quarterback, or, someone that's competing for that second, third spot. And the room certainly needs that.
Yeah,
Mac, any thoughts?
No,
Go ahead, Sweet.
Sorry to cut you off. I just to go off of that. No, I like how you pointed out. Kiffin has shown that just because you're the one making all the money doesn't mean that that you're going to be the one that's taking the snap. So, that in itself, I think, opens the door for another starting quarterback to come in to compete, because that's a legitimate, proven fact already. So it gives a quarterback who believes in himself and wants to compete. He says, hey, you know what? I can go in and beat these guys out, and we'll see if he wants to smoke. D-Mac?
Yeah, no, I love the philosophy to pitch Longstreet as, hey, you're going to be our guy in the spring. You'll have every chance to win this quarterback job. I mean, there's a talented quarterback in the room that you're going to be competing with, but at the end of the day, we want to win a championship, and we're going to play whoever the best guy is. If that is the case, and I'm going to throw a little I don't even want to call it doomsday, but if Longstreet comes to LSU, wins the starting job, and you're potentially paying your backup quarterback, what I've heard numbers 5-6 million for Levitt. That would be an interesting thing to see in college football. A $6 million backup quarterback.
It's going to happen. If not with LSU, it's going to happen with somebody, because at the end of the day, these coaches are trying to hold on to their jobs. So yeah, I can't picture a coach saying, we're paying all this kid, we're paying this kid $6 million, but this kid who we're paying $750,000 for gives us a better chance to win. Well, that means that I'm going to lose my $13 million a year if I lose. So I'm going to start this, this cheaper kid, and it'll all come out in the wash. That's going to happen. I wouldn't be surprised if it happened this year to somebody, and LSU might be that team. I was going to say one QB off the board now that was available not too long ago is everybody's favorite Finley, TJ, and he is going to Incarnate Word for his
And he's
seventh
played there before.
his seventh stop, second one at that particular place. Geez, I didn't know that he was 6'7". Did he grow since he came to LSU? Because he was only like 6'4".
Now, he's a big guy.
Yeah, he's a real big kid. You know, and I mean, he's got a family to feed, and this is his best way to do it, as he said. So, I'd be curious to see what Incarnate Word paid him, but I hope it works out for him.
Yeah, what's Incarnate Word is now D1, so that's a trend in the right direction. But I can't imagine QB1 at Incarnate Word making more than what 60, 75,000, which I'm not knocking that by any means. You know, but man, it's a interesting career path. But you know, if he balls out this year at Incarnate Word, you know, who's to say he can't be picked up as, you know, a third string or a practice squad quarterback because they love the size and some of the intangibles. You know, you saw the Colts draft guy. Now he was, you know, QB1 at Florida, but based off the same premise of he's got the size, the intangibles. So let's draft him in the first round and see what happens.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm trying to find out what he got paid. I can't see it and try to get it out. I would guess that he probably got it 6 figures. He probably got 100,000, maybe a hair more. Quarterback.
I think it's possible.
Yeah.
You never know. I mean, look, all these schools. I mean, even North Texas last year had money people in it, so there's nothing that surprises me with what these guys are getting right now. But you know, going back to like the comment about the backup, you know, quarterback getting 5-6 million if he doesn't end up being the starter. If he starts the season as a starter, doesn't play well, and goes backwards, I think one of the things that coaches have probably learned this cycle is the old saying, "Loose lips sink ships." I think you're going to see some coaches be a whole lot tighter with their comments. I'm going here with this is Kiffin didn't help himself from Friday to Monday with his Tennessee stuff. I mean, if you're an LSU fan, sure that made it a lot of fun. But when Tennessee's the main team that's competing for you to get Levitt, and you're tweeting that stuff, tweeting the Tiger, you're basically telling them they better up their bid, which I think happened through this a little bit. And so you got to, and then the whole way that he handled the Williams and Levitt scenario. And granted, he didn't know exactly when Williams was going to announce. I mean, that was on Williams, you know, to do that. But I think coaches are going to say, you know, look, I got to be a little more cautious and a little more strategic in how I handle things to not drive prices up, because we're certainly seeing that like never before in this portal.
Yeah, you know, like we said in the beginning, when LSU put out, you know, we're going to spend 30 million, 40 million in NIL. All you did was told every player on your roster, we got more money to spend now, boys. Hop in that portal and get you some of it. I mean, I think it's great that, you know, that you're excited and you want to spend the money and stuff. But you know, it was, yeah, this whole thing is just such a shit show with this recruiting your own players back to your, you know, every single year. It's just it's disinteresting. It just isn't what college football is supposed to be. Hopefully they come up with a way to fix it. You know, I'd even be good to going back to the way it used to be in the old days when, you know what, if you transferred, you sat a year and, you know, and you got one transfer and that was it. Even if they, you know, hedged on that a little bit and said, okay, we'll give you 2 transfers. Your first one's a freebie, but if you transfer again, you're going to have to sit a year. do something, because it's totally out of hand right now, and it's gonna price a lot of schools out of the business of football.
Yeah. So, based off what LSU's brought in so far, we'll pull Sam Levitt off the list. Who is your favorite transfer that LSU's brought in so far, Kevin?
I'll go two. I go Jace Brown, the wide receiver from K State. I really like him. I think in Kiffin's offense, you're going to see. I think he'll be similar to Trey Harris. So I really like him. And then the second one, I'm going to go with Jordan Ross, the defensive end, the edge guy from Tennessee. I think he has a lot of upside, and I really think you put him in the defense that Blake Baker coaches and Relaford on the other side. I think So I think LSU's got to have better pressure from their ends next year, and I think those two guys will. Number one, I think if Relaford would have played this year, he would have had more sacks than either Peyton or Pyburn. So, but I think Ross and Relaford are two interesting ones. So I would go Jordan Ross and Jace Brown. Those are two guys I'm really interested in. DMAC, what about you? What's your one?
Yeah, so my defensive guy is going to be Malik Blockton. I loved him at Auburn last year in the role that he played. He's really able to eat up some blocks and really good run support guy. Love him. And then I'm going to go with, I want to take a wide receiver, but I'm going to take Dylan Jones, the running back from Wisconsin. I think he committed yesterday or today or the day within the last 72 hours. That's a good find this late into the transfer portal cycle. We got Caden Durham back, so I don't know how big of a role he will have, but I love getting a guy who I know he had an injury, but was big time power conference starter. And I know I just said Wisconsin is a big time power conference team. They've fallen off here of late, but they've really produced some good running backs over the years. So those would be my two guys. What about you, Sweets?
All right, for defensively, I'm with you. I like the block and pick up a lot. Looking forward to seeing him in purple and gold. I think he's got a lot of talent, and I think even as a situational player, if that's how they choose him to use him, I think that's going to set up really well for LSU on the offensive side of the ball. I was looking at the 27 receivers we got. I'm trying to get him to take one more. The kid from Marietta, Cam Perry. He's a sub 4.4 kid. He led the country in yards per catch, just under 23 yards a catch, and he had the catch of the year. I'll put it on. I'll put it on for you guys. But I really wish they'd go and get him, because there's also a special teams kid that flies. But I want to see how the kid that they got from was it North Carolina Central, Jaquan Sprinkle,
Yeah.
a road grader at guard, a big kid. We need offensive linemen, and I'm hoping this kid surprises and gets that push up a little. He had a great season where he was, so hopefully that translates.
Yeah, tons of talent in the portal. I do think that LSU will still add one more wide receiver to the room. I don't
Yeah.
have any name predictions, but I do think I don't think anything's missing. But
We-
with the scholarship allotment at 105, I think we're
Exactly.
probably sitting somewhere around 83, 84. And some of those walk on guys will earn scholarships. Like I expect a Mill, the quarterback from Episcopal, will probably earn a scholarship as QB 4 or 5. So I think there's going to be some of those guys, but I think we probably still have 12 to 15 more spots. Going to probably use 5 of those on O line, I wouldn't be surprised if there could be another safety for depth added, maybe a corner, a linebacker, and then you can never have enough skill guys, in my opinion.
Yeah, the 20 extra scholarships and the SEC should have went to that last year when the rest of the country did. To hamstring your conference like that was just unforgivable, really, because what you've done is you've given everybody a year head start. With 20 extra guys, and if we could have got a lot of those kids in last year, we might not be in the position we are for depth at certain spots if we had 20 more bodies in the room from last year. So better late than never. But I agree with you, DMAC. There's certainly room for. There's not a position on the field that you can say, okay, we're totally good there. You can always use extra talent, and we're this is how Bear Bryant used to do it in the olden days. He'd just recruit all of them and keep them to himself. And so, to get 105 kids on scholarship, you take you better be able to find some talent in there somewhere.
I will say I do love our running back room having what, 5 scholarship guys, or is it 6 now?
Six now.
Six scholarship guys with, the 1-2 punch of Harlem Berry and Caden Durham would be projected. Durham had some lingering issues, but I think that if he's got a good off season to get healthy, he was great as a freshman. I loved everything about him. So if he, gets back to that form a little bit, that's going to be a deadly 1-2 punch in the SEC.
I think he will, because I think he's going to have a coach that lets him be a running back, instead of telling him to just run to the hole, and if the hole's not there, you still run to it, because it's not it's just ridiculous. I'm still baffled that that's an actual fact that Coach Frank Wilson was telling these kids, run to the hole. Don't wait, don't hesitate, don't bounce outside, run to where we tell you to run the ball. It might be why we averaged like 2.2 yards a carry for the season or something, but what do I know?
I think that one thing that stood out for LSU this season is from just a pure coaching, on the field coaching. We probably saw that how I'll just call it Frank Wilson is not a good coach.
Yep.
Not X's and O's. He's not. He's been a good recruiter, and I'm going to say this: Frank made his heyday because Les had good offensive lines as far as run blocking, and Frank recruited some really top guys with Fournette. He was kind of fortunate with the time, but that the running game back then had success because that was Les. Nothing to do with Frank, and Frank proved it this year. And golly, the running back room. So I mean, to me, not going to talk bad about him, but he certainly. I would not if the running back job was open next year. There's many people that I would have looked at before him, and I don't think it's a surprise that Texas hired the Florida running back coach over Frank Wilson. I'll say that.
No, I think that a lot of people are starting to see, that, listen, you can never have too many good recruiters on your staff. That being said, I've watched a lot of New Orleans kids, especially recently, go go out of state, and take the bag. So that tells me that it's 9 times out of 10 the kids are going to want the money. So you can send any of us in there with a bag, and we can close a kid if we've got a blank check to write. So
That's right.
it's changed. It didn't always used to be this way, and when it was a different way, when as Coach O said, we're not walking the money through the front door. Like we're walking it through the front door now. We used to walk it through the back door. Frank was good at walking it through the back door and getting stuff done. Now that everybody's playing on the same playing field as far as that goes, it kind of shows that relationships aren't all they're said to be. Now, that being said, there have been a few kids follow him to Ole Miss. Would we have liked to keep Kern? Yeah, but I mean, he's not the end of the world. He wasn't that special as a freshman that we're going to miss him that badly. I just look forward to getting the kids in that want to be here and getting coached up, especially in those two areas specifically on the offensive line and in the running back room.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Kevin, any last minute thoughts before we wrap up tonight?
One, and I'll go outside college football. Who would have bet at the beginning of the year that the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers would be looking for new coaches with Tomlin and Harbaugh? I think that's a really interesting thing. Those two teams in the last 15 years have pretty much dominated the AFC North. Uh, been on both teams have been on a little bit of a hard time the last 5 years in the playoffs, and so I guess that's why we're looking for new coaches. Uh, I think Baltimore will regret Harbaugh. I do think for Pittsburgh it was time for Tomlin. He had a great run, but I do think it was time. So I just think that'll be interesting. And Harbaugh's getting a lot of talk. I read today down to three teams: the Falcons, the Giants, and the Titans. Living in Atlanta, I would love to have Harbaugh come here. It might make me want to go watch the Falcons play. So curious to see what Pittsburgh does. I would love to see him go after Marcus Freeman. Knowing that organization, I don't see them going after a college coach. They'll dig deep and do their research and probably hire a good coordinator at some level in the NFL. Interesting stuff, though.
Yeah, that you bring that up, that's wild. And you're a Steelers fan. I'll just ask you point blank: do you think that they were getting rid of him and told him we'll give you the option to walk away, or do you think that he said he was done?
No, I think so. I think it was time. I think he's held on the last couple of years, barely, because the organization liked him, and I think they kept and he's been there a lot of years and he's done a lot for the organization. So I think it was kind of like, okay, we're going to give you one more year. They signed Rodgers. You know, I tell you where he got in trouble in Pittsburgh. The offensive coordinator. I'm drawing a blank. He was a coordinator for LSU for 1 year under Orgeron.
Oh, douchebag, tall, skinny guy.
Yes, bald headed.
Yeah.
Came from
Oh my.
Pittsburgh to us. Ran all the motion.
Yeah, this is.
I should remember his name, but I don't.
Well, as you guys are thinking of it, I'll say this about him. So Tomlin played.
Matt Canada.
He was like Matt Canada, yes. So Tomlin played for him when he was in college, and Tomlin kept him around for 3 years as the OC, and their offense was terrible. That really damaged his brand, Tomlin's brand in Pittsburgh, in my opinion, and that put him where a lot of people. I mean, look, there's a lot of people the last 2 or 3 years that want to change, and the organization stood behind him and kept him. Like I said, gave him another year here and there. Um, but I think keeping Canada around and their offense being so bad put Tomlin in a situation where he had to win big to do it. And look, he hadn't won a playoff game since 2016. So yeah, I think the organization at this point was like, look, 19 years. Thank you. You've had a great run, but we've got to go in a different direction. And they do. And they're right at the edge. I mean, they've got some guys with Watt. He's getting up there in age. That roster, because I really think they got to look at not just the coach. I think they got to look at the whole GM, the whole front end situation with what they've got there. Metcalf's the only really explosive receiver they had. I think they've got a lot of opportunity. They need a coach and they need some good alignment. And that organization has been as strong as any for 25 years. But right now, it's not at its best moment.
DMAC?
Yeah, we're 31 days from baseball season, so got to get a little baseball plug in here. LSU's kickoff baseball banquet is this Thursday, so good time to meet the team, kind of get a feel for how the players are feeling after coming off a championship with another loaded squad coming in this year. So I'm ready for baseball season. I have kind of leapfrogged over basketball this year, which is unusual for me for sure. But LSU does have a big basketball game tomorrow against Kentucky, so we'll see how the Tigers fare in that one without DJ Thomas again. But yeah, I'm kind of full focus on baseball from a sports perspective at the moment.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to it. I guess that wraps us up. So like, follow, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your enemies, put it on your social media, get us out there. More content will be coming out. Like I said, rumor has it there's going to be some swag coming out, some Southern Sports Gumbo swag, shirts and stuff like that. Have to prop up my boy DMAC there. He'll get it going, and look forward to seeing people in it participating. Let's go.
Yeah, y'all have a great week, and we'll see you soon.